Thanks, Vicky. It's been a long day, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. But there are a few things I want to do. Firstly, I want to thank the organizers for all the work they put into this event. And it has been a huge amount of preparatory work and behind-the-scenes organizing. I want to thank all the lecturers for their inspiring talks over the last 2 days. Some of them come a long way to be with us. And thirdly, I want to thank all of you, particularly those of you who've traveled a long way, for coming and joining us and participating very actively with your questions and comments. It's been a very lively couple of days. So thanks to you for really being a big part of this, the success of this event. We've learnt that African cities are growing rapidly, right? Our urban population in Africa, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that over the next 25 years or so, the urban population will double. Right? That's a massive, massive challenge. It's a huge opportunity, as Ed and others have reminded us, if we can get this right. But it's also a big challenge that we can't just assume will take care of itself. It has profound implications, what Africa is going through at the moment, profound implications for societies, African societies, because of the wide-ranging impacts on patterns of work, patterns of living, the environment, and indeed government, what government has to do to help this process and support this process. And without more concerted attention to this, you know, the risks, the downsides, as Ed puts it, the demons of density, of congestion, of health problems, and so on, are formidable. So this is really, I hope you are inspired by what you've heard and will indeed get actively involved in your research and other activities, activist activities that you get up to continue and take this forward. We need to build a much bigger community that is indeed understands these issues and has the skills and the knowledge to help with this agenda, because there's a really big job to be done here. We've heard about the importance of government being responsive to what's happening, and that isn't straightforward, as we've also heard. Our governments lack resources, lack capabilities in many cases, and therefore, you know, the response has to be fit for purpose, has to be appropriate, was the word some people used, to ensure that those interventions are not grandiose, or not smart cities, as we sometimes talk about them with due respect, you know, modeling Dubai, but are really models that are relevant and affordable for Africa. So we have to be appropriate and sensitive to the context. And I think that's a really important message. We've learnt a lot from some parts of the world, Chicago and its sewage system, New York, and it's also its public services issues. In many cities we've heard about historic lessons, but we really need to know more about Africa because the context is different. We've had a taste of what an economic lens on urbanization can offer. And there are a whole range of techniques and insights and questions which come when you try to apply an economic lens. And there are different lenses. I think we've also heard that. There isn't a single economic approach. There is econometrics as a tool. There is modeling as another tool. There are other approaches we've heard slightly less about, institutional economics, where the focus very much is on the formal and informal institutions. We've heard less about behavioral economics. Although we've heard it's important, we've heard less about political economy. So there are a number of different paradigms and different kinds of questions and frameworks that can be applied here and will be more appropriate for some questions than for others. We've certainly been made aware of lots of issues and lots of questions that need to be asked. And so I hope that will be helpful to you in your own research, and indeed following up from your masters and your PhDs in follow-up research that you might do, that you've been stimulated to think about, big questions that face us. There are certainly many of those. We've heard about the value of some economic perspectives, thinking about price signals as a way of, getting an insight into a starting point, into understanding what's happening. We've heard about the importance of certain new data sets and new technologies that become available, artificial intelligence, cell phone data. There are some really exciting developments in terms of opportunities for research, which is a new generation I think you have that we didn't have as older researchers, older academics. And certainly there's a lot of work to be done. So a few sort of facts that struck me as listening through the last couple of days. The first one was how in Ghana, 3/4 of people work within 3 kilometers of their home, and how different that is from South Africa. In South Africa, because of our history, the vast majority of people who have a job have to travel a long distance to employment. So our cities in Africa are very different. We shouldn't apply the same brush to them for historical and other reasons, and we must really be sensitive and alert to these important differences. We've heard that Africa has some of the slowest cities in the world, and maybe that's not a surprise to those of us who have the opportunity to travel around. We have massive issues of congestion. We've heard that some of our cities have the worst sanitation systems in the world. And again, that's not a surprise, but it is a wake-up call. It should be a wake-up call for where priority efforts need to focus. We've heard a lot really about the very disastrous effects of poor quality sanitation and what a transformative effect it can have to have a decent sewage system. We've heard that we're also very, very vulnerable to climate change. And so it's really important how we respond, because some of these physical responses can actually exacerbate the problem and make it more difficult to accommodate climate change and ensure that our cities are resilient and can cope with disasters, such as the water. We heard a lot about the water systems and how cities struggle to cope and respond to droughts. And we've heard a lot about informality, but I think we've heard less about researching this, given some of the data problems that surround a research on the informal economy. We've heard both some of the downsides of informality, but also some of the positives in terms of a lower cost, more flexible, more responsive system to manage some of the challenges we face. And then finally, what we heard from Ed, I thought was interesting, was the way we need chiefs. You would have thought chiefs were confined to rural areas and so on, but we've heard that chiefs can also play a useful role in managing markets where trust is in short supply and help, and where the state is not very present. So I hope, pulling it together, I hope that this will be the start of a journey for many of you, and that we will begin to build a community, a network of researchers interested in urban economics, and that this will grow over time. You have some opportunities open to you. The IGC have generously launched a fund to sponsor some research in this area, and I hope many of you will take advantage of that opportunity, and indeed work together to take up that opportunity. That would be fantastic if we could see examples of cooperation emerging among you as you move on. I hope you'll reach out to us as well, ourselves in the University of the Free State, and also the lecturers who were talking to you over the last couple of days. There's an opportunity there. Many of them have actually said, contact me if you want further information, want to get in touch. And I hope we'll have some follow-up events to this. We're planning, for example, at the University of the Free State, we're planning a distance learning short course in urban and regional economics. We're still at the planning stage, but we've got a curriculum, and we need to do a budget and so on. But at some point, we hope to launch this course, and I hope some of you will participate in this program. Over the next few days, I hope we will see more of you and have further conversations at the conference in Cape Town. And we also, finally, another announcement. We've just advertising at the moment a dozen postgraduate positions at the University of the Free State. And I hope if you don't know the details, you can contact us. Details are widely available. They're on LinkedIn and elsewhere. But so those of you who either yourselves or know of other people who are in the market for a master's or a PhD or a postdoc position, get in touch, and I hope you'll apply. So I hope you're inspired. I hope you're going to stay in touch, and I hope you will progress in your careers and ensure that this wasn't a one-off, a flash in the pan, but was the start of something big. So a round of applause, I think, for everyone is thoroughly deserved. And the final thing I want to announce is that there's an opportunity for Justin to demonstrate a data set, a database, a data tool, a portal that has been created in the last couple of years around firm-level data. If any of you are particularly interested in this tool, would like to demonstrate it as an opportunity, again, for research in this field. It's quite an exciting development here. It applies to South African areas, territories, firms, rather than the whole of Africa, unfortunately. But I hope some of you, particularly South African researchers, will hang on for 5 minutes. That's all it will take. Justin, do you want to come down and join us? So if you don't want to see the demo, you don't need to hang around. You can go and relax, etc. So let me just hand straight over, Justin, to you. Say a bit more about it.
Yeah. I promise I won't take long. But I think something you might have noticed from Ed's presentation and from many of the speakers is that economists no longer just work on survey data that comes from statistical agencies, but more and more there's innovation to try and look for interesting sources. And the IGC is kindly sort of putting out a proposal, to write up your research question. And I'm sure that sitting out there have been many interesting questions that have popped into your head. But unfortunately, to have a credible question, you've got to have credible data to answer it. So these things are not always so linear. It's sort of an iterative process of exploring and finding. So we wanted to just demonstrate and show you one new source of data that might be an opportunity to do something innovative with. It's quite simple. If you just go to www.spatialtaxdata.org.za. There we go. You can see that here's the data portal. And so what we've done is we've gone into a secure facility within National Treasury where there are records of tax filing. And of course, because it's someone's tax records, it provides a whole universe of formal firms in South Africa and the workforce related to them. Now, in many African countries, that's kind of leaving out half your workforce, but in South Africa, actually, our level of informality is quite low, maybe about 15%. So it's really pretty comprehensive. And at this site, you can actually download the raw data, but there are also just a number of tools for you to play around with just to get some ideas as to what could be relevant and what you could do with them. So I'll just show you two of them and then I'll be done. So here's a Map Explorer tool, right? And the connection's a little bit slow down here, but hopefully it'll work. So of course you can analyze it at different levels. We've got neighborhood level data for the metros, and then municipal or district or provincial. So let's say you select local municipalities, and are you counting firms or are you counting employment? Let's click, we want to count employment. Do you want to look at the tax year or the tax month? We'll look at the year, and then a whole range of different variables that come from the tax data. What's really interesting is that if you select something like industry, it gives you a lot of detail. So it's not just saying, I want to look at manufacturing. Let's find manufacturing. But actually, I can drill down to see what kinds of manufacturing. Of course, heavy industry in South Africa with the constraints on electricity supply, invariably that kind of sector struggles, whereas there might be more opportunity in things like food products, right? But you might be interested in more than that for whatever reason. You might be interested in meat or fish or fruit or oils or dairy products. So again, the power of administrative data to really give you kind of granular insights. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Food products, it's confirm. And then how do we want to view it? Let's just do a total count. And we'll just use the latest year, and the data goes from 2014 through to 2024 in terms of the tax year. So there's a decade of data. Click play. And there we can see the distribution going on. It's a log scale. And so you can see the metros clearly popping out. That's what we expect. But maybe it would be a bit more interesting to do it not as absolute, but as a percentage of each municipality. So what share of the workforce is in food processing here? And here you see a little bit more interesting examples. So why is Neketana in South Africa quite high? I'm not sure. These are the things you can sort of explore and see how the spatial distribution play out. Okay, so that's the one sort of tool you could play around with. Another one, and I'll also promise it's going to be quick, is that you want to analyze a curated set of figures for a particular place. So let's pick a municipality. Today we are in Cape Town, and we click go. And here's a whole range of different figures showing you what's happened in terms of the economy of Cape Town, in terms of its performance over time. You could sort of go through them yourself. But again, what's really interesting is some of these detailed sectoral trends, how Cape Town compares with South Africa. So again, an example of using administrative data to try and get much more of a granular picture of what's going on in local economies. And certainly for South Africa, we think this is an important and an exciting resource that you could combine with other things in a variety of different ways. Great. I hope that was useful and worth your 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Well done, everyone. See you at the conference tomorrow.